Lloyd. And of course, Supreme Leader Snoke. Oh, okay, Caesar, King Kong. I couldn't go on and on.
Bye, everybody.
So, do I sit, stand?
What do you think? Let's have a sit for a bit. I've been sitting all day. Actually. I don't mind sitting.
So that was quite a list of characters, and as they reminded me, I even left out Caesar and King Kong. What do you see unites these characters that you've played, aside from you?
Well, I think they're all characters that, I mean, really, when you think about it, 20 years ago, this technology called motion capture that was first used to differentiate between visual effect and character really started to come into being with Gollum, and all of the characters that have sort of come out of that have really enabled the process of acting in lots of different forms, different creatures, different beings, but they are all united in the sense that they all have a deep and complex psychology, which really motion capture allows you to manifest it in all these weird and wonderful ways, from a 25-foot gorilla to a 3.5-foot ring junkie to an evolving chimpanzee. But they're all united by, I think, great writing first and foremost, and as an actor responding to a great script written by all of the writers from all of those franchises. Being able to bring about a link between physicality and deep emotional psychology.
I was thinking, so many of them have either primal emotions or deep, deep, dark secrets. Is that what draws you to the roles, or what draws them to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've obviously got a very dark streak inside me some of it. I mean, I, as an actor, you know, what appeals to me about a script or a story is that I know that an audience, when they've been through the experience of watching the movie or the play or the TV show, that they're going to somehow come out of it the other side changed, or their perspective is changed about humanity. And that's what's so amazing about all of the franchises I've been involved in, that they say so much about humanity and you know, how the world is evolving and not always in a great way, and how there is a disparity of understanding and a lack of empathy and so on and so forth. So what attracts me to a character when I first take it on, I mean, for instance, when I read the script for Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the first one, I read the pages, and it was, you know, this young creature is brought into the world, his mother dies, he's raised by human beings, he doesn't really understand how he fits in, he feels an outsider, he then gets taken, he realizes he's changing and evolving and becoming more evolved as a human. He's then put into a sanctuary along with other disparate ape groups who are not united, who fight each other, and then he becomes the leader of a revolution, takes them outside. You know, I was reading all of this stuff, and then of course I realized that this character is a chimpanzee. You know, so it's you know, I don't go in thinking, oh, I'm going to play a chimpanzee, therefore I've got to move around like a chimp. It's what is this character saying about our emotions, about our psychology, about the world that we live in, and Caesar, and then Caesar in the second films and the third films was all about the evolution of a society now that the world was changed, and that if you start again, rather like actually the Animal Farm that I'm working on at the moment, if you got a chance to start again and create a society, how would that society manage itself? How would it evolve? And so all of these things are, what I'm saying is, I suppose, it's not just about the physicality, and a lot of people think that performance capture acting is just about pantomiming the movements of an ape or a gorilla, or, you know, finding a way for Gollum to move. And it's so much more than that. It's really understanding what the character is in the particular world that it exists in.
I was on set of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which was really cool to watch, and you were in the suit with the golf balls, and actually at that time it was LED lights. And you explained to me that for you, the character often comes from the voice. Can you explain that?
Well, I mean, with Caesar, we see a huge trajectory throughout the course of 3 movies.
In fact, he begins with no voice.
He begins with no voice, and the first word he says is no, and that is like quite late on in the movie, and that was a significant, and that came out of it's not a fully formed, it wasn't a fully formed human expression of the word no. It was a guttural, animal, kind of primal kind of scream of no, at the injustice that was going on in the ape sanctuary. And then over the course of the 2 movies, Dawn and then War, you saw this gradual progression, and we worked really hard, all of us, all of the guys playing apes, to find a way of. And
they weren't all just guys.
No, guys. I mean, I use guys as a non-binary collective.
Okay.
Guys and girls, if you want to say, but we all worked very, very hard on the evolution of the voice and how that would change, and what it is, how the bone structure would change in your throats, or how your physicality, as you're becoming more upright and more human-like, how that would affect voice, and also the construction of the sentences went from being, primal sort of sounds to words that came out of breath. So it was a sort of gradual and that we found that, for instance, you couldn't really use words with lots of syllables, so you wouldn't say, "I'm going to be communicating with you," or you wouldn't. That wouldn't work. It had to be, "I speak." So it's like. We found a language for them as that evolved.
I want to take you back to Lord of the Rings, in fact, the 2 towers, and I have a specific thing for you. So there was a big media event, and it was October the 30th, 2002, and I was talking to 2 of the conceptual artists, John Howe and Alan Lee, and I said, we were supposed to get Andy Serkis, and he said, oh, he's still working. He's still on the stage doing Gollum. That's October the 30th. The film opened on December the 5th. How crazy was that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The thing with these big movies, and especially using a technology that was evolving, and the way of creating a digital character was evolving. We shot right until the last minute. And Peter Jackson, I mean, I'll give you an example with King Kong. Peter Jackson hadn't actually seen the final version of the film, because 2 of the visual effects shots were being flown for the premiere in New York without him having seen 2 big visual effects shots in it. That's how close to the wire. Pete works right up to the last minute.
Is that because the technology just keeps getting better and you look at it and go, we can tweak that, we can tweak it?
Yeah, because it's always the search for perfection, always the search to make things better, and you use every single second before that film is released.
I notice now there's a lot of talk about AI in every field. Do you think that's going to affect your job as an actor?
It's interesting because a lot of people are getting worried about that, but then people were terrified about performance capture. They said, when I first started working in performance capture, and most actors didn't understand what that was, they were like, our jobs are going to be taken by robots, and it's like, or there was a real fear of this new technology, but it's only enabled actors to play so many different things. So, of course, with the evolution of the internet, 25 years ago we had no internet. Look at what the world is and how it's changed and how we communicate and how brilliant things have evolved from the internet, and awful things have evolved from the internet. Technology is only what it is in the hands of the users, and so if you use AI in a creative, really intelligent, brilliant way of being able to tell stories that will move people, not just maybe in 2D, but in 3D, and be present and immersed in a story, then bring it on, But equally, there's deep fake. Equally, there's there's ways of misusing, and especially the sort of post-truth world that we live in, a lot of the technology that's being evolved can be used for nefarious reasons. You know, I mean, we all, I don't know, actually, out of interest, I've just played a character in Luther the Fallen Son who abuses the use of technology. How many people have seen that film out of interest? Okay, so watch it, guys, because nobody's seen it. I mean, it's a bit disappointing because you won't know
Well, and it actually is the capstone to a lot of these questions because it is about performance, but your character is obsessed by technology.
He is a tech. He's a tech whiz who is. I mean, really, the whole thing about the character that I play is here's someone who fully understands the capability of using technology in a really, really manipulative and controlling way, and he's able to use all the Alexas that are in your houses, all of the microphones that are inside your laptops and cameras that are inside your laptops to watch you all the time and then shame you. So it's a very interesting. That's why I took that role. It's a very dark and pretty nasty character, and you know. I nearly didn't take it because it was actually, I thought, God, I really want to play this guy. But I thought the debate was very interesting about how technology can be used for good things and for horrendous things, the dark web, and you know all of the things that can, the way that you know the dark web operates to manipulate people. So yes, going back to your question, AI, all of these things. I mean, photogrammetry and. What I love, what I've always adored about performance capture, it is sort of the end of the age of typecasting in terms of any actor can play anything. You know, I went from playing, you know, Smeagol the Golem to this 25-foot gorilla, you know, in the next film, and it's like it means that no matter the color of your skin, what height you are, what sex you are, what you know. If you've got the ability to empathize and climb into the skin of that character, you can play anything. You can absolutely play anything. And I think it's a really interesting technology now where, obviously, you know, we've been through a sea change, a massive sea change in terms of casting actors and, you know, the sorts of stories that are being told. You know, the Woman King, you know, the revolution that's taken place over the last 5 years in where stories come from and the sorts of stories and the untold stories and the underrepresented actors and, you know, people who should be telling stories. Obviously, we've been through a big change in the last few years, and this technology can work alongside that to allow anybody to play anything, and that's why I've been such a big advocate for it, I suppose.
Well, we're here at Toronto Comic Con, and you mentioned stories, so I have to ask you, as a comic book guy myself, and I'm wearing my Tantan pin proudly, you, at the University of Lancaster, you did a Raymond Briggs graphic novel adaptation. So your interest in graphic novels goes way back. What attracted you to them, and is that a factor when you take a role? Because you've done so many wonderful comic book roles.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. That was one of the first stage productions I sort of directed and self-directed. It was a one-man show based on Raymond Briggs's book, The Tin Pot Foreign General and the Iron Woman, and it was about the Falkland Islands War. And I made these huge kind of puppets and sort of, you know, it was a real exploration of how to bring the graphic novel into a theatrical kind of existence. So I've always been fascinated by you know, the deep-rooted sort of you know, again, it's the graphic novels tell such truths that it might even be harder to communicate in any other medium. And actually now we found a film language to be able to actually bring those to life in such a powerful and, you know, using absolutely quintessentially using the graphic novel as the basis. And that fascinates me.
This is going to be an unabashed plug. This is your the first 2 issues of Andy's comic. So tell me about this.
Yeah,
Take a photo.
So this is I was very, very fortunate to work with some incredibly talented graphic novelists and story artists, and This is the Greek myths reimagined as as graphic novels, and they feel very contemporary, they feel very current, and they're very beautifully drawn. If you ever get a chance to read them, I met up with a producer called Andrew Levitas, and he was an artist, and we talked together about creating a series of graphic novels which are based on the Greek myths, and which didn't feel like old and sort of unconnected to the modern world. They're very, very modern in their storytelling and what they're saying about humanity.
So one of the ironies is you're a trained visual artist, you're interested in all that. You also have made a wonderful career doing audiobooks. You read so much of Lord of the Rings, you read The Hobbit. You were a part of the, I don't know what to even call it, audio drama of The Sandman.
Yeah, I love audio books, and obviously, as we all know, sort of the rise of the podcast, the rise of audio books in the last 5 to 10 years, and particularly during COVID, which is where I did that. For those of you who might have seen or heard it, I did that online reading of The Hobbit in one sitting. It was 11 hours, and I had 4 2-minute pee breaks, and it was quite exhausting, I have to tell you. And there were literally moments where I'd be halfway through a passage, and I've already made the Hobbit movies, and I'd be halfway through a passage, talking as if it was Gandalf and it was Bilbo at the end of it, So I was like 7 hours in, 8 hours in. I was, reading like doing my very best in the television, and then I realised it was Bilbo. And I'd have to go, oh, sorry everybody, scrap that. Let's rewind. Let's go back. I'll start again on that paragraph. It was a real test. Anyway, from that, HarperCollins, publishers of all of the Lord of the Rings books, or Tolkien's books, asked me to do a proper Audible.com version, which I did. Then they said, would you like to do Lord of the Rings? I was like, wow, gosh, it's going to be long and tough. And it was 6 weeks. I was doing it for 6 weeks with just me and the microphone there, every day for 5-6 hours, and doing it was like 132 different characters in those books. And then they said, and then literally, and I thought, that is the end. I'm done with Middle-earth. I am so done with it now. And then literally a year later, they said, would you do the Silmarillion? I was like, the Silmarillion, which is so hard and so complex, but beautiful. So I couldn't not do it. So I have been through the whole canon now.
Well, I'm told that Lord of the Rings is going to get a movie reboot. What do you think of that idea? And Peter Jackson is involved. Would you be involved if you were asked?
I mean, of course. Look, I would do anything. I'd go to hell in a handbasket with those guys, because they are, great storytellers. They're a family that I have in New Zealand. I'm so close to them. I've done more kind of big movies with them than anybody else, and they're truly great people and compassionate human beings, and great storytellers. So, I mean, I only felt. Do you know what? I was actually doing some press for Luther 2 weeks ago, and people kept saying to me, so you're going to be involved in the new Lord of the Rings? And I was thinking they were talking about Rings of Power, and I was going, no, and they said, and I was saying, oh no, the Rings of Power is really great, and it's done, I've really enjoyed watching it, and they're going, no, but are you going to get involved in it? And I'm like, and they're going, no, Peter Jackson's actually doing some more films, and I was like, I had no idea. I actually had no idea whatsoever, so I had learned through the press.
That's our job. That's what it is. So speaking of new projects, this leads me to Animal Farm, which you're working. Now, to be honest, I'm really surprised that you're here in Toronto. You've been doing tons of press for Luther. You seem to be on my podcast list everywhere. And you're in the middle of doing Animal Farm. So thank you for showing up. I mean, that's Tell me about the passion project.
We've been trying to make Animal Farm since 2011. 2011 we started. It was during the time of the first Apes movie, and I'd loved Animal Farm as a book. In fact, I was talking to someone about it earlier today. the first books I read as a young adult, just, you know, like when you start to read the first sort of slightly more adult books, not children's books. The first two books I read were The Hobbit and Animal Farm. Those were my first two books. And of course, I now spent a huge chunk of my life with The Hobbit, and the same was to be with Animal Farm. And again, it was a story that just, out of interest, how many people here have read Animal Farm or know? That's good. That's good. The rest of you read it. It's really short. It's the most beautiful, and George Orwell describes it as a fairy tale, but it's an allegory for the corruption of, you know, power, absolute power corrupting absolutely, and the rise, particularly when he was writing about it, he was talking about post-Russian Revolution, Stalinism, and totalitarian Russia. This, our version, we were determined, and we worked with the Orwell estate very closely, that if Orwell were writing Animal Farm for today, what would he be? What would he be satirizing? What would the fairy tale be a cloak for? What would, you know? So it's very, very contemporaneous. It's also has a lot of humor in it, and it also has a particular point of view. Anybody who's read the book will know that it tells the story kind of from afar of the animals rebelling against humans, creating a new world, a new order, a utopia where they all work together equally. And then through the bad leadership of the pigs then ascend to become a kind of ruling class. And in fact, the rest of the animals are in a worse off position than they were underneath the rule of human beings. So it's like, how do you make that? I mean, look around the world at what's happening, and you can see how eternally relevant that book is still. But the ways of telling and the language of telling that story have changed, and the targets, the characters that are being satirized are not Stalin and Trotsky and Lenin and all of those people. They are, I'm not going to say who, but it doesn't, you don't have to look too far to realise it if you dig into it. But it feels very, very modern, and as I say, it's a family film. And it's taken us a long time to find a home for it, and we're working now with an incredible visual effects company. It's an animated movie with a fairy tale style, but feels quite painterly and classic in its look. But we're working with a company called Cinesight and Aniventure, their production arm, and they're incredible partners who really understand the way we want to tell the story.
Well, it's a fascinating timing because this book is still one of the most banned books. It's still on the banned books list. So what do you think the reception is going to be? I was actually, frankly, quite surprised you said it was going to be a family film. Are you going to get banned in Florida?
I hope so. The thing is, there is politics in the book, but with the way that Orwell wrote that book, it's so, he smuggles in the politics underneath the guise of a fairy tale, and that is the craft of what we're trying to bring to this story. So no one feels like they're being talked at or being told what to think, or it's smuggled in under a level of humour that is the language, the cinematic language of now. So yeah. I mean, I think that's how it'll work. We want everyone to come along with us. We don't want people to. We want people to come out of it with a perception change and kind of really look at themselves.
That leads me to the question about so many of the projects that you work on, and I'm going to focus particularly on Lord of the Rings. That's still relevant. That was a book that was written a long time ago, and yet when the books started coming out, when the movies started coming out, they seem to resonate. And even when we watch them again, they still resonate. So what is it about fantasy that allows that to not date, or to sort of mutate in a different way?
I mean, that's why everybody is here, because we all are passionate about stories that are emotional and relevant and connect to you either personally or through the world and the way that you see the world. And that's whether it's Lord of the Rings, Planet of the Apes, Marvel films, the modern day mythologies that we all choose to watch and live by are worlds created by artists and not politicians. and the world of the artist is a world that can hopefully see the way to a better place. And that's not what we're at the moment. We're in a very difficult, horrible place. And so it's even more important to have stories that resonate for us and that give us hope and give us drive, and characters that we believe in, or characters that we know we certainly should stand up to. That, you know, but we do it within the safe environments of a great modern set of mythologies, and I think that's why we're all here. That is what connects us all, both you as an audience and as us as filmmakers and storytellers. So I seem to be being quite heavy. Do you want to go on your impression?
That's partly me. I'm the king of heavy. You know, all the pieces I did for Space and Prisoners of Gravity, we wanted to be heavy because we wanted to show that these actors and producers and writers actually were putting something in that you might miss. And I can't, soon I'm going to open it up to the floor, but before I do, I have to mention Kino Loy. What a remarkable, so tell me about getting the script and tell me about why that character resonated for you, because for so many of us, what a brilliant performance.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, I've been incredibly surprised at how much that character has affected people. And today alone, you know, people have just been sort of saying, oh, is Kino coming back? The thing is, Tony Gilroy has written the most, again, it goes back to the writing. It really all hangs on great writers and great writing, and obviously he's the showrunner of the TV series, but Tony has written a version of the Star Wars universe which is kind of, obviously, for those of you who've seen it, less sort of space opera, less fantasy and more grounded in the sort of the swimming in the darker end of the swimming pool, if you like, you know, the murky grey area end of the swimming pool of the Star Wars universe. And with that comes the world that Kino lives in, and that was what attracted me to the script, was that suddenly it was like, it almost didn't feel like it was part of a Star Wars story. It felt like here was a story about real oppression and how on earth. God knows there are so many oppressive regimes around the world at the moment. It's how do you survive? What enables you to survive? And when you're constantly numbed by fake news, or you know, that we are controlled in so many ways about, you know, the post-truth existence that we just don't know. We don't know what is solid enough to believe in other than storytelling, quite frankly, I think. And anyway, so Kino, when I read the script, what I loved about the character was that here was a man who probably in a former life before he's incarcerated on Kino 5 is a shop steward or a factory worker leader who is good at bringing people together to stand up for their rights, for, you know, workers' pay, or, you know, all of those kind of things that we can relate to. And then he's you know, imprisoned for that very reason. And then he loses that part of himself, which is thinking of others and thinking of the service of others or helping others, and he becomes totally self-obsessed, just wants to get through his prison sentence and get out. And actually, who would judge anybody for that if they were in that situation? If you were suddenly incarcerated, put in prison, you would just get your head down, not cause any trouble, do what you're supposed to do, and not, you know, just try and get through it. So that journey, which is then completely flipped on its head with the arrival of Cassian Andor, who is someone who does believe in the possibility of change, who does believe that you can actually make the world a better place, reignites Kino Loy to make that speech where he does galvanize everybody, bring them all together and lead them to freedom. And that I just think is such a, I mean, it's just such a, he's a very flawed, heroic character, but that I find more relatable to than pure heroic characters, I think.
But he makes the hero, Cassian Andor, more of a hero because his job was to make people heroes,
exactly,
in a way.
Exactly.
So I'm going to open this up. If we could have a line on that side, the woman has her hand up over there. There's going to be a line over there. And we'll start on this side. I don't know why, it's Andy's side, so we'll prefer that. So tell us who you are and what your question is, and please end your question with a question mark.
Okay, so my name is Mike, and I was wondering, when you play a role like you did in Luther, how emotionally taxing is it, and how do you kind of detox from that type of intensity? Question mark.
Nicely done. Without going into too much specifics, because nobody's watched it. No, I'm only joking. You can watch it tonight. It's on Netflix. So anyway, as if it needs any more publicity. But no, it is a very dark character, and as I say, when I read the script originally, I literally wanted to throw it in the bin and have a shower. It was that bad. But actually, it was the debate that I thought that this character would bring about how we've given up our responsibility with the internet, and almost we're blind to its dark side. But it was a matter of going in every day and looking really at the darkest part of my own personality to try and humanize this person. But I mean, I think if I played this role, to answer your question, if I played this role, say 20 years ago, I would have, and I have been through my life and used different forms and different methods of creating characters. But when I was a younger actor, I was pure method, and in the sense of staying in character all the time or for long periods of time. The fact of the matter is, at this stage of my life, with, you know, I have a family, I've got 3 kids, I'm directing Animal Farm, I've got a business called the Imaginarium, there are so many other things I have to manage. One of the things I've had to learn as an actor over the years is to compartmentalize and be able to actually put a character down and then immediately pick something up, because nearly every day on Luther I was directing animators in Montreal from London, you know, at the same time as shooting Luther. So in many respects, I didn't have time or the luxury to wallow too much in the thank the Lord, actually, quite frankly, with this character. I was able to jettison myself out of it quickly.
Thank you very much for your question. That was great. On this side.
Hi, Andy. I'm Bobby. I just want to say thank you. I just want to say thank you for coming here, sharing your passion, sharing your art, sharing your craft. Because this is my first ever Comic-Con Fan Expo. Even though I've loved Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, Lord of the Rings, the Planet of the Apes has been amazing. So thank you so much for sharing everything you've done. I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that, because I think that goes to my question, which is. The advent of sci-fi and fantasy and getting accolades. I remember watching, Picard in First Contact. I was like, give him an Oscar. And then I saw you in Lord of the Rings. I was like, man, give this guy an Oscar. And then there was buzz about that, and it didn't happen. But to me, motion capture and what you do as an actor with that is tremendous. And then I saw Caesar, and I was like, wow, the subtlety, the nuance, what you brought to the story, and the character, and the meaning behind it, that makes me emote, right? It's so powerful. We're now seeing the last 5 years that accolades and awards are going to people that are diverse, but also now with sci-fi and fantasy. I'd love to get your opinion on, motion. First off, I think you deserve an Oscar, but I also believe that when are motion capture going to be nominated for awards and get the accolades that they deserve and they're due? Thank you. Question mark.
Question mark accepted. I think. Look, I think it's a lot further on than it was 20 years ago. I mean, literally, there was such a grey area, and I think the problem was that there's an acceptance not just by the acting fraternity, but by the animation fraternity, because animators do a huge amount when you're creating a CG character. Of course they do, but it's all ultimately to do with the authorship of a character. And in the old days, the authorship of the character was entirely left to a team of animators. And the difference is, with a performance captured role, the authorship of a role is left entirely to the central authorship of the role is led by the actor. And that's the difference. And so there's a lot of spectrum in that. There's a lot of grey areas where, I mean, obviously, when I'm playing King Kong, to get the weight of a 25-foot tall, hundreds and hundreds of pound weight gorilla, I wore weights on set every day, and used that to create real physicality. But there are certain things that are augmented to make to make Kong the scale and size that he is. So the animator's job is to take the authorship of the role, the moments, the character moments that are captured facially, the internal performance which is filmed, and to actually create a form of digital makeup. And they don't like that word, and I understand why they don't like that word, because it's not just about creating a digital mask. There are augmentations. Kong's jaws can open a lot wider than mine can, but it's interpreting the actor's performance. So I can understand why it's taken time. But the fact of the matter is, if I was wearing prosthetic makeup for a role, say for instance you take a role like Gary Oldman playing Winston Churchill, completely unrecognisable. John Hurt, may his soul rest in peace, playing the Elephant Man, completely unrecognisable. That is the artistry of a team of people. That has nothing to do with the actual performance. So it's just that's why I say it is a kind of digital form of prosthetic makeup without taking anything away from the artistry of the animators, which is considerable. So does that sort of make sense? And therefore, that's why it's taken time for both actors and the animation teams to acknowledge it. I mean, if you looked at the Oscars this year, the visual effects, all my friends actually, who had worked on all of the films that I've been involved in, were involved in the latest Avatar. And Richie Baynham stood up and says, we would like to thank the actors for their contributions to these roles, because we couldn't have done it without them. And that's absolutely true. It's 100% true. Those performances would be nothing without the actors' performances. Equally, they would be without the artistry of the animators, they wouldn't have appeared on the screen as they did. So it is a kind of difficult, but I think the appreciation of the actor's performance is begun to be understood now for sure.
Thank you very much for your question.
Hello, I'm Danny, and I'm actually a theater student, and I come here with a question for my whole class, which is, we want to know how you discover the voice and body of your characters, and also how you take care of your voice and body when you're in the process, when you're filming the role, how you take care of yourself so that your voice and your body are still healthy.
That's a great question. So for me, when I'm working on a character, there are three very distinct sort of separate points of departure. One is finding, and this goes back to when I first started acting and was a theatre actor. And when I started acting, I think I did about between 40 or 50 plays before I went anywhere near filming. So I had done a considerable amount of theatre where, and in the UK at the time, there was a system called repertory theatre, which is a bit like what your stock theatre is, and I don't even know if that still exists in the States and Canada now, but the idea that you'll have a company of actors who are performing a play at night in a theatre, and during the day they're rehearsing another play altogether, and then when that play comes to an end, the next play goes into production, and there's a cyclical kind of thing. So my first job, I joined a theatre company called the Duke's Playhouse, and I was there for about a year and a half, and I did 14 plays back to back, rehearsing during the day, performing a different one at night. And that really engages you into physically finding a character, vocally finding a different character, and psychologically investigating the character. And so that's the process. And so, for instance, with Gollum, and I'll give you Gollum as an example, and I'm sure a lot of you have already heard me talk about my cat inspiring me to create. Who hasn't heard that story? Oh, there's a few. Okay, I'll do it again anyway.
More than saw Luther, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, clearly. Okay. So for instance, I was working on when I first started working on Gollum, I was looking at paintings by Egon Schiele, I was looking at paintings by Francis Bacon, I was trying to find movement that was tortured and racked and kind of, I was inspired by lots of artists, and then watching animal videos and reading through Tolkien's words and saying he moves like a spider here and a dog there, a puppy here, and it's like how to combine all this together. And one thing I knew with Gollum was that I had to connect the voice, because he's called Gollum because of the way that he sounds. And when I was in this kind of early form of exploration, my cat at the time, Diz, came into the kitchen, and I remember sitting there and I literally had the copy of Lord of the Rings in my hand, and I was going through all the pages, making notes, and he started to cough up a furball, and I watched his spine, and his spine was doing this kind of move, and he was going, and I was just like, he's going to die right now. I was really, and it was just like, he's choking, and that was, I thought, oh, this is really interesting. And so that was like, as this stuff's coming out of his mouth, and suddenly I thought that suddenly became, that was how the voice started to evolve. And then it was kind of building him into two different personalities, and Gollum being the more guttural, controlling older brother of Smeagol, who was the more innocent, sweeter, more, naive, we think, until the third film where he becomes the more manipulative, actually. So that is always, I think, and sorry, my answers are incredibly long, you've probably noticed. So I hope I get through. I'm going to try and get through them a bit quicker. But it always comes about by this kind of triumvirate of kind of investigations into voice, physicality, and psychology, and linking them up, basically.
Wait, how do you take care of yourself while you do that?
Oh, yeah.
Third part?
Well, I drink a lot of honey. Well, it was called Gollum juice actually at the time, but honey and lemon and ginger and all sorts of stuff, and gargling, and I remember doing one ADR session for Gollum, which lasted about, I think we were doing it for about 14 hours actually. It was a long session, and we just had to, I was just downing pints of this stuff just to keep me going. You have to take care of your voice, and that voice particularly was quite, it was quite a challenging one. Although I think I did some damage to my vocal cords that have never really recovered, and have probably made me sound a lot sexier in later life.
We'll be the judge of that.
Yes,
thank you,
absolutely.
Danny. Thank you. Yes, next question.
Hi. I'm a little close, sorry. I'm over you.
Hello.
I'm here for my dad today. As a child, Lord of the Rings scared me, Gollum specifically. But I'm wondering, what was your favorite scene to shoot, voice act for, or just watch within the trilogy?
I loved working with Sean and Elijah. They were just amazing to work with. They're just brilliant actors, and the relationship that, it was interesting because as we went along throughout the course of the movies, and the more Gollum became closer to Frodo, the more Elijah and I sort of, our friendship grew, and the more Sean was a bit like, hold on a minute. He was getting a little bit jealous, and it was really, and there was one day and it was at the gates of Moria, and there's a moment where they're going to run through the gates, and Gollum jumps out of nowhere and grabs them and pulls them back. And I promise you it was an accident, accidentally grabbed hold of Sean Astin's wig by mistake, which came off in my hands. And he was like, what? And he went crazy. And I was like, dude, I didn't mean to. It was a complete accident, So I enjoyed that. No, I mean, I love so much of it. I'm shooting out in how many people out of interest have done the trip and gone down to New Zealand? Yeah, you see, and the rest of you can go and do that as well. After you've watched Luther, you can start booking your tickets and that. No, it's an incredible place to shoot out on location. And also an incredible place to shoot out on location wearing nothing but a skin-tight motion capture suit, I can tell you. Especially swimming through ice-cold ponds and rivers, which was interesting. And then, but I suppose the scene in the Two Towers where Gollum and Smeagol really have that face-off with each other. That was something that took, we took a long time to get right. There were lots of revisions in the script. We shot it on location, we then shot it in the motion capture studio, we kept reworking it, revoicing in ADR, and it was a long process, but that scene really sort of, in the Two Towers, really did kind of, I think, epitomise what was so great about the technology of performance capture and allowed you to see the very subtle differences between those characters. And I'll never forget seeing that scene at the opening night in New York at the Ziegfeld Theatre, and I just remember the entire audience in that scene just all kind of sitting up in their seats like this and just kind of going. I was watching it from the back, and collectively this entire audience just started going like that, and I just thought, that's me. Nobody knew I wasn't. It's quite a nice moment.
Instantly iconic. Like, I mean, it was crazy. Thank you for your question. You didn't give us our name, but your name.
I'm Odessa.
Okay,
Odessa, thank you.
And over here.
Hi, I'm Malcolm, and I just want to say, big fan, and Lord of the Rings, it also did scare me as a kid, especially Gollum, but now I love him. But
I think I have accidentally traumatized millions of children.
it's all good. I like it. Now I do. But Caesar, I think he is my favorite character that you've done, personally speaking. So I'm just curious, which movie in the Planet of the Apes trilogy did you think you enjoyed exploring Caesar's character development the most? Because I feel like Dawn was my favorite because it does really explore that gray area perspective where both sides have a point, but you're not really sure who's like the good guy or the bad guy, and I feel like that movie really stands out in that trilogy. But I want to know what you think.
Look, I agree that there are moments in that film where you know, Caesar, having been brought up by humans, completely sees the human perspective and doesn't judge people for being human. There are good humans and bad humans, as there are good apes and bad apes. So it's a very complicated and knotty kind of sort of argument, which Caesar goes on that journey alone because only he has that experience. For the rest of the apes, it's like clearly all humans are bad, you know, and there is no room for forgiveness there. And Koba, you understand Koba's point of view as well, you know, played brilliantly by Toby, you know, amazing performance. And so I do think that, and also what Matt Reeves did so excellently in that film was to take the great work that Rupert Wyatt had done, and there was a moment in time where it was the whole film was going to, after the rise of the Planet of the Apes, it was going to jump forward like hundreds of years. And Matt, when he came on board, went, "That's so totally wrong. That's going to, you've just built all these characters that we really care about. We've got to see the evolution of a society," and that for me was actually thrilling, both as an actor in process while we were in rehearsals, and we would do these long improvisations, and it's going back to the kind of the language thing, the apes discovering language, but it was, you know, how are they going to all begin to communicate together, and what is the social way that they relate to each other? How do they sit in groups? How do they nurse each other if there are injuries? How do they, you know, how much of humanity do they bring into, or human attributes do they bring into the way that they are? It was just the process. I mean, I wish you could have observed and seen, or I wish there'd been some more behind the scenes actually of just the hours of, we'd be in character for hours as apes, not talking, not doing anything, just being. And then suddenly something would happen, and then it would erupt into some sort of disagreement or whatever, and then it would settle down again. And it really was magnificent. You know, you forget that if you don't have that process in filmmaking, and so much of filmmaking is you have to do preparation in isolation on your own and turning up and doing it with your other actors on set. But having the luxury of working with your fellow cast, like a rehearsal for theatre actually, where you do get a chance to be together, to really explore it. That was what that had, and that was a wonderful experience.
Thank you for your question. And if I may add, I just want to add something. What was it like to play a character literally from the moment of birth to the end? What was, spoiler, sorry. What was that like?
Is anybody here not seen the Planet of the Apes? Oh. Out. No. Well, okay, so spoiler alert, shut your ears actually for this if you haven't seen it. But yes, playing playing that journey is, I can't think of any other role that any other actor has ever done where they played a character from birth through to death. You know, and that is and was one of the great challenges of that trilogy, and as I say, the evolution of the character. So it was a remarkable journey over the course of 7 or 8 years.
Thank you, Matthew. That was Malcolm. Sorry, Malcolm. Thank you. Over here.
Hi, I'm Laura. I've been a big fan of the Planet of the Apes franchise, and I saw Luther the day it came out to Netflix. And you did amazing. You did amazing in that movie. My question is, would you rather play villains the rest of your life, or just stick to heroes the rest of your life?
Well, you see, I'm not sure what that laugh means. But anyway, it's a difficult one because I don't really see the world like that. I don't really see the world in terms of good and evil. I actually don't see it like that. It's far more complicated, and that's, I suppose, the point of taking those characters on. I think we are all who we are for various reasons, whether it's genetic, whether it's behavioural, whether it's nature, nurture, however you want to put it. We are the sum total of good or bad parenting, or being abandoned, or being overly looked up. We are so the characters that I play don't ever have a kind of, this is an evil character or a villain. This is a very good person, or So it's always, I think nearly every role I've played has been in that murky grey area of. If you really try, and again, it's about presenting that to an audience for them to then have their own debate about it. It's actually not, that's the point. As an actor, I really believe that my job is to instill a questioning and a debate and a sort of something for you, the audience, to go away with, which then makes you think further about it, rather than if I was just to go, he's totally evil, you'd come out going, oh, well, he was obviously an evil character, and then you shut down any possibility of change, or change of viewpoint, or trying to understand it. I mean, I'll give you a really, really interesting example. Did anybody see that show about Jeffrey Dahmer? Okay, so now some people refuse to watch it. I know people who refuse to watch it outright. Some people came away from it being incredibly moved by it. Some people were furious about it and thought it was glorifying, a serial killer. Personally, I thought it did exactly what I'm talking about, which is to open up a big question. There's a point in history where, where the police were homophobic and racist and allowed this serial killer to get away with so much. Now, that was part of the discussion of the series, and I won't go into too much detail if you haven't seen it. But for me, I found it, and I sat and watched it with my wife, and we were riveted by the personal relationships in it, the relationship with Jeffrey Dahmer to his dad, and it's just like, look, we're all parents to our children, and if your child happens to be a serial killer, how do you deal with that? How do you actually deal with that? They're still your child. What do you do? Just completely cut them off? Would you try and understand them? So those kinds of questions are really the questions that I ask when I'm playing, all of the different sort of ranges of characters that I get involved with.
Thank you. That was great. Great question. And I could tell by your pause that was not a canned answer. You had to think about that. This is going to be our last question and our last answer, Andy. So just tee it up. We're over by 5 minutes. I'm actually bogarting the time.
I'm sorry about all you guys queued up. I just talk too much, basically.
But go ahead. What's your no pressure? What's your question?
Hi there. I'm Brennan. You've clearly inspired a lot of people with the characters that you've played. So my question for you is, out of all of the characters that you've played, what's the most rewarding experience you've gotten as an actor?
Look, I think I would be, in terms of reward. when I set it, I think, look, I have to go to Gollum, not because it's obviously become kind of a very well-known character and has traumatized lots of children, but it was in the discovery of playing that role that a new way of acting was sort of part and parcel of that, and sort of being at the right place at the right time when things were going through this huge sea change in terms of characterization, and as I say, this move from visual effects to character. The rewards continue to give to me in the sense that it's enabled me to play so many of the characters that you've all enjoyed, and you know, and that's why it's kept me going. It's why I started the Imaginarium, so that the technology can then go on to actually, because the reward continues for me because my exploration continues, and it says that technology has allowed me to think, how are we going to receive stories in the next 10, 20, 30 years time? And I firmly believe that we will be involved in a way of immersing ourselves in cinema that we've not yet. We're only at the tip of the iceberg, but motion capture plays a huge part in that, and virtual production and all of the technology and video game technology that kind of is associated with you know, film production now. It's merging with a sense of theatre. If we all go back to the beginning, the shaman who sits around the fire telling the stories, where he stands up or she stands up and becomes a character, you know, then becomes Greek theatre, where there's a proscenium arch. You know, you're standing, we're up on stage, you're down in the audience, so we have more control and power to tell the stories that we want to tell. It's now coming back, and then cinema, you know, where it goes from being just Shakespeare's auditoriums to a flat cinema screen where we're all sitting watching. And this is a long-winded answer, but bear with me. There was a theatre practitioner in the 70s and 80s in Argentina called Augusto Boal, and he used to create forms of theatre it was called forum theatre. So he'd go to the community that he was working with in various different villages, and they would find out what the issues of that village that they wanted to discuss. So it could be, I don't know, the disparity between the rich and the poor in that community. It could be police brutality. It could be, you know, it could be anything that you can think of, you know. And he would workshop with the community these issues, and then they would create a play, and then they would have the play, and the audience would sit down like you are now, and they would start the play off, but anybody in the audience could then step up. If there was a moment in the play where they thought that it was going in the wrong direction and that the protagonist was going wrong, they were able to put their hand up and walk up on stage and take over that role. And so it was giving birth to a thing called, instead of being a spectator, that you're a actor. And that is where I think cinema is going, and storytelling, because I think we're going to have a moment not far off. Look at James Cameron's new Avatar, that kind of immersiveness with those kind of CG characters. Imagine if you can walk in and out of those characters, and that you're part of the narrative somehow. That with VR, AR, all of the technologies that are becoming available, I think that's where we're heading, and that is why Gollum is being the most rewarding character, because I wouldn't be on that journey if I hadn't played him.
I really know where to go from there, except please, a huge Toronto Comic Con applause for the man who took us on a